Yo, Babblestorm in the building. It's been a while. I haven't streamed much this year in 2019, and I've played games quite a lot less as well in general in my spare time. I thought I'd do this video as it would be a nice way to wrap up 2019 and let you guys know that I am still alive and I still play the odd video game here and there for a few hours, maybe a week tops, maybe 3, 4, 5 hours tops a week, but nowhere near as much as I used to. And I thought I'd cover why and my feelings about the gaming industry in this video to wrap it up and where we might be going in the future. So the topic of this video will be, why have I fallen out of love with video games, and is it me or is it the gaming industry, or as I'm thinking I'm going to conclude, it's a bit of both. This year I managed to go on a few great holidays. Went to Edinburgh at the beginning of the year, then Split in Croatia, and then a few weeks ago I came back from Amsterdam. So what I'm going to do to give you something to watch while you listen is just a loop of some of the videos I took while on holiday. I'll just put them on in the background to watch. It's just mostly landscape ones, but just to give you something to sit back, watch, and listen to my lovely voice. Here we go. So if I just play that. So just to go through what I wanted to cover really is, why have I fallen out of love with video games? I have quite a bit, not totally, but it's definitely not my main hobby anymore. I mean, is it possible after gaming being a major part of my life for over 30 years, is it possible that it's not my main hobby anymore? Also, why have I fallen out of love with games? Is it because I've changed, or has the industry changed? I'll spend the next few minutes articulating my thoughts about that and where I'm currently at with what was one of my biggest hobbies of all time. So at the beginning of this year I started playing Guild Wars 2 and ended up putting over 500 hours into it. Before this point, my main games over the last few years of being in my 30s were League of Legends, followed by DayZ and Mortal Online. League of Legends I put 1,600 hours into, DayZ was about 1,000, and Mortal Online was about 800. Those were my main games for the last few years, with the odd games in between, such as Path of Exile, Arcade, and the card game Hearthstone. When I look back over the last couple of years, the beginning of the end of video games for me was when I stopped playing Mortal Online, really, in the first half of 2018. As I've said many times before, Mortal Online is very unique in my opinion. It's a hardcore sandbox MMORPG that has open world PvP and is rather slow paced with lots of exploration. And it's in a first-person world where a lot of player interaction is needed. So to me, it's quite a very immersive, engaging game. For me, Mortal Online focused on having all the main elements that I believed made a good MMO. Unfortunately, the development team behind it, Starvote, they're not a big development team and they don't have much budget. So the game is amazing in concept, but pretty janky in reality. So leading on from Mortal, when that was kind of what I would think is the last game I really, really enjoyed, I decided to take a step back from gaming and see how I could enjoy gaming without taking it as seriously as much and putting as much of a time commitment into it. So that's when I started looking at games I could put an hour or two into and put back down again quite easily, without getting sucked into 45-minute arena matches in League of Legends where you have to drop everything else and you can't even answer the phone or talk to anyone else in the house while you're doing it. So I mean, when I started to focus on games that were a bit more casual, I started playing Guild Wars 2, where I enjoyed completing the main storyline, and then went on to grinding the fractal dungeons, and then spent probably a couple of hundred hours getting half decent at the PvP in it. Before I decided, I kind of got a bit bored of that and wanted to try something new. So it's probably March of this year I started playing Apex Legends. It was only literally a couple of weeks after it came out, so whatever date that was this year. And I even managed to play with a few online friends that I used to play with a year or two before on DayZ and League of Legends. This time though, all of us being a bit older, the spark wasn't quite there. We got good at the game pretty quickly and started being in the top 3 teams repeatedly. This was before it had ranking or anything. But after a few games, we just weren't that engaged with the game, or in playing it together didn't really add much to it. We just at this point had other priorities in our life, and I would say that is mainly because of us changing as gamers and not Apex Legends, because to me Apex Legends is one of the more unique games out there in the last and successful games out there in the last year or two, and it deserves to do well. I put a few hundred hours into Apex Legends, but the camaraderie of playing with others was no longer interesting, and this kind of made me realise we'd simply moved on. So after playing Apex Legends, I think it was about not that long ago now. I'm talking about mid of this year, maybe June, July. That's when I got Elder Scrolls Online and started playing that. The aesthetic of it appealed to me quite a bit. The art style was more gritty with a less cartoony art style. And I heard it improved a lot since it first came out. So I thought, well, let's get into that and see how much I enjoy that. And again, like Guild Wars 2, I spent a few hundred hours in it, completing the main storyline and grinding dungeons, and then doing the Battlegrounds PvP in it. And then when I got orientated myself and understood the PvP and was doing all right in that, this is where kind of the end of gaming for me began to sink in quite a lot heavier. So it's only been the last 6 months have I went from playing video games daily to playing them hardly at all. And I think when I stopped playing Elder Scrolls Online a few months ago, that's kind of when that was another nail in the coffin, so to speak. So the first nail in the coffin for me in gaming was when I finished playing Mortal Online last year, and finishing Elder Scrolls Online was another one really. So I went from playing daily with games like DayZ and Mortal Online to then playing not quite as much with Guild Wars 2 and Elder Scrolls to kind of playing a lot less now, where actually I'm enjoying more casual games I can just jump in and out of quickly. And at the moment I'm playing a bit of Prison Architect, playing Legends of Aria because it's free, and I might try out like some of the other games that's went free to play lately, like Wild Terror. And I've been playing the odd hour here and there in games that I've had in my Steam library for years, like Witcher 2, stuff like that. And I'm still looking at Green Man Gaming website at the moment, and tempted to buy Dragon's Dogma, which Rage recommended. And I was thinking of getting the Deus Ex Mankind Divided, or just like a few quid each. But I mean, going back to my gaming over the last year, I mean, with ESO, similar to Guild Wars 2, I just got tired of doing the daily quests and realised I spent the last few weeks playing these games without much interaction with other gamers or really enjoying the gameplay. I find generally with MMOs in particular, once you kind of get used to the PvP and get half decent and you've completed the main storyline and got a gist of the dungeons, from that point onwards most MMOs are just about grinding cosmetics, whereas at least Mortal Online it was more about the journey and the player interactions and the suspensefulness when it came to potentially getting ganked. But in a lot of MMOs it's mainly focused on the end game and not the journey. And I mean, with a lot less interaction, that happened just because a lot of friends typically split off into playing lots of different types of games and playing them less and less. And I think that was because, especially kind of with DayZ, where we started to fall out of love with multiplayer games a bit, and felt like there was a bit of a drought where we were getting a lot of indie games that were half finished, or recycled AAA games. At this point, it felt like unless I was playing a mainstream game like Call of Duty, Fortnite, or Rocket League, I was going to end up playing any games for hundreds of hours before I could find anywhere again to call home. And the thing is, to find a game to really get into when it comes to multiplayer, and it's a big time investment, and the effort required to do so made me realise I was on a journey to finding enjoyment from other hobbies that required a lot less effort but returned a lot more fulfilment. So this year I've got more into watching things on Netflix, joining a few fitness and running clubs, and just even reading books. All things that doesn't require hours and hours of grinding or trying to find a game that isn't the same old gameplay but in a different skin. I mean, what I've realised this year is that I do like gaming, but now I've started to like doing stuff in the real world even more. And it's made me think, for me personally, kind of video gaming was just a midway point to discovering my real hobbies that I wanted to do. It's sure felt like it this year. I mean, for most of the year I've been going to running clubs almost every day, watching Netflix with my wife, and discovering classic books such as Catch-22. I mean, thinking back on this, the main reason I started to enjoy these things more was because of how much less time was required to get something out of them, in terms of a story, or learning something from them, or getting some sort of connection or social fulfillment out of it. Also at this point in my life, as I creep closer and closer to the dreaded 40 years old, I'm starting to realise how finite my time on this planet is. I'm more mindful than ever of wanting to use my time as productive as possible, not just regarding the work I do, but also from what I spend my spare time doing. And thinking back on a lot of time that I've spent playing video games, they can be a very isolating experience, whereas going to running clubs or just going to the pub is a more enjoyable experience. Connecting with people, making connections with people and sharing stories. I mean, in a video game, it takes a long time to make a connection in a video game, especially one that feels meaningful. I mean, it's got to the point where if I've got a spare few minutes, I'd literally rather spend a few minutes learning a bit more Spanish in Duolingo at this point. And as I say this to you, I'm starting to realise it's more of how I feel like I've changed over the last year or two, rather than the gaming industry. But I will touch upon a few of the main problems in the gaming industry that's kind of egged that process along. I mean, for me, the problem with video games and what it's always been, and makes them their own form of entertainment, is that they generally take most games at least 1 or 2 hours to feel like you've made any progress. And as you get older, 2 hours feels like a long time, with or without lots of responsibility. I mean, it feels a long time just compared to other forms of entertainment. I mean, I can sit and watch almost anything on Netflix for 30 or 60 minutes nowadays and feel like I've been entertained more, and I've been told a better story compared to most video games. After an hour on Netflix, I've usually watched a couple good episodes of something, whereas in an hour of a video game, I've barely got used to the controls and only just started exploring my surroundings. Another reason for the lengthy time requirements involved to play is created by the choice of the gaming industry, because most games are built to have some sort of repetitive gameplay loop built in, instead of having lots of unique gameplay experiences. MMOs especially suffer from this, and the player base is partly to blame for that, because they focus more and more on getting to the end game instead of enjoying the journey. We've got to a point with video games where we're so spoilt by the amount of visuals and the fast pace of modern games that players are almost encouraged to sprint through the game regardless of whether the content is actually good or not, and that's why over the last few years I've enjoyed the most games with slow-paced, inertia-based combat, such as Dark Souls and DayZ, which is a style of gameplay that I think still has a lot of potential in the future. But even if you play a single player game for the story, most of them are not great storytellers. With Netflix or reading a book, I feel that I'm more likely to get a better experience because the main focus of their format is to tell a story. With flashy visuals, not a high priority like it is in gaming. To have a good story from a video game, you really need to dig deep or stick to the well-known AAA titles such as Mass Effect and Witcher, or go back to the old school games like Planescape Torment and Baldur's Gate. Another point is that after playing a video game, I don't really feel like I've relaxed much, which is kind of one of the main points of why you do stuff outside of work, for enjoyment. Most games, especially the fast-paced ones, you finish the game and you feel just as tense or more tense than what you did before you started playing the game, which is not ideal when you've just had a long day at work. And I mean, it is well known that as gamers get older, they tend to play more strategical turn-based games. But when it comes to those type of games, I haven't figured out what ones I could be into. But I've been eyeing up the Steam sales, and there's ones like March of the Living Dead, Darkest Dungeon, and FTL. They're looking quite tempting at the moment. I mean, generally because of the nature of gaming and everyone being time poor, even younger people, the last few years of gaming, I feel, has been distilled into becoming mere time killers, which is why I think mobile gaming, battle royale and arena based games have got so popular. Games that are engineered to fill a few minutes of your time while on public transport or waiting for dinner to cook. Ironically, video games have the biggest potential to provide the biggest and most unique experience, but at the same time it's also their downfall, as developers struggle to focus on only doing one or two things really well in a video game. Instead of doing that, the developers try and tick as many boxes as possible to please everyone, and to make a good marketing gimmick out of it, such as being procedurally generated. I'm looking at you, No Man's Sky. I mean, we have more choice than ever when it comes to video games, but still very few games are good at achieving what they set out to aim for. I mean, we could say that for any form of entertainment like movies or books, where there are plenty of mediocre titles that you have to dig to find something good. But the difference with the gaming industry is that no other form of entertainment struggles as much as the gaming industry does, because of the complexity involved with building a game and the timescales involved, and the money required, and the risk of whether it makes a profit or not, or things that are a lot of a greater issue in the gaming industry than it is in any other form of entertainment. I mean, a bad film, song or book is not likely to be bad like a game is because of a lack of time or budget. And I know I'm not the only one that spends a lot of time browsing the sales on Steam for hours on end, or browsing the game list of games I already own, and you can't decide which ones are worth your time to install and try out. I mean, it is similar on Netflix, but at least I don't have to spend 20-30 minutes playing a game to find out if I enjoy it. With most games, you have to spend even longer than that to get an idea of if it's worth investing more time. I mean, on Netflix, you can see pretty quickly if it's something worth watching or not. I mean, and the thing is, the movie industry is a lot more mature. The movie industry is better at providing a relaxing experience, a more developed story, and it doesn't rely so much on visuals, unless it's an action movie. Whereas it does it regardless of the genre in video games. Most video games, people do want to see good graphics. And when you compare it to the simplest form of entertainment, something like a book, it might just be words on paper, but books are really good at one thing, and that's telling a story. And with books, as long as you choose a book in a genre you like, you are likely to enjoy the story, whatever it's about. There's less room for a book to go wrong, unlike a video game with the development and budget issues that arise. I mean, it sounds terrible, but that's why I've almost started agreeing with people who say video games are for kids, and there's a hint of truth in that, because games for kids are a new experience. They tell stories that are good enough for young people and provide an interactive experience that is new and different. But as an adult, the storytelling isn't great if you've watched a few decent films in your lifetime. And there's only so many ways you can move a mouse and press buttons on a keyboard. I mean, I know this is trivializing gaming a lot at this point, but that's kind of summing up how I feel after playing video games for over 30 years. I'm seeing the same gameplay over and over, but in a different skin most of the time. Maybe the biggest reason for not playing games so much this year is just from being a jaded old gamer, but saying that, the average age of a video game is 35, so I'm only a year older than that, so maybe it's just the length of time I've been playing them, or simply I just need a break. I think with what I've just covered, World of Warcraft is kind of a good highlight of where we're going with the gaming industry, where a few years ago World of Warcraft player base peaked, and it's slowly been going down, and I think that's kind of reflective of the gaming industry as a whole, maybe not by the amount of players, but the interest certainly in MMOs in general, in where the gaming industry is going more towards mobile gaming and games that aren't so take so much commitment now. I think World of Warcraft, where are we going to go from there, really, because the gaming industry does feel a bit stagnant, especially in the MMO industry. I mean, I know it's going to sound controversial, but sometimes I feel like video games are a good hobby to have until the person finds a hobby they really, really like. So games are good time killers and okay at what they do at large, but they generally seem to be quite difficult to truly enjoy and almost always end up being secondary to a main hobby for people. Certainly out of myself and a lot of people I know around my age. On the other hand, video games are great for those who who can't leave the house, for example, due to physical or mental disability. When we look at the economics of the gaming industry, most games are really cheap nowadays, and I think that's become a bit of a problem because games have become really disposable, almost to the point where I now compare a £5 game to how much fulfillment I'd get out of it compared to buying a cup of coffee and a cake. This is mainly because with games I only ever put 5 or so hours into them before deciding I've got the gist of what the game is about. And most of the time the gameplay in the first 5 hours of a game rarely deviates from the gameplay after playing it for 50 hours. Most of the time I'd literally rather spend £5 on getting a coffee and cake after doing a park run on a Saturday morning, because it's more about the experience, and hanging out with people afterwards. And as with any form of entertainment, there's a lot of fat and filler in the gaming industry. Some might call that more choice, but a lot of that choice, similar to a lot of stuff on Netflix, it is filler. And with music as well, and everything else, these markets are so saturated now, from being around for so long, that you have to do a lot of digging to find what you like. But I think in particular with the gaming industry, we need to get back and realise what makes a game good. We need single player games with unique content and stories that capture you, and multiplayer games that provide interesting player interactions, not just a grind treadmill. I don't think it's all doom and gloom with the gaming industry. I mean, for children and young teenagers, I think games are still very relevant. It's a way for them to learn how to socialise with others on a basic level, and enables them to educate themselves with interesting visuals and stories, and provides challenges that you can't get elsewhere. I mean, what does anyone listening think? I mean, are most games just for kids and simply time killers for those that are older? Is there hope for the MMORPG genre? I mean, why do you still play games, and where do you see the gaming industry going? Are we going to be stuck with half-baked games from indie developers and recycled franchises from big developers for the foreseeable future? I mean, if you've listened this long now, let me know what you think. And take it easy. Make sure to start 2020 with a positive mindset, and who knows, maybe I'll stream at some point. At the moment, I'm just happy to put a few hours into the odd game here and there, and hanging out, watching other streamers on Twitch, and lurking in the odd gaming subreddit. There you go. Over and out. And if you want to ask me anything, let me know on twitter.com/Babblestorm. Over and out.